Good morning and welcome to another edition of the Greenbridge Community Housing podcast, Luton South. We're joined today by Tim Archbold, the CEO of Signposts. Good morning.
Morning everyone. Hi Jackie.
I've brought the sun with me.
It's beautiful out there today, isn't it?
So nice.
Yeah.
It's so nice. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
You're welcome.
It's been a long time coming, hasn't it?
It has. Yeah, it has. And there's one thing I love to do is talk, and even more talk about me and Signposts.
So we're going to be great.
We should do okay.
It's all going to be good. So I came to the celebration of 40 years of Signposts, which was an amazing event. So thank you for inviting us. And I still haven't used my notebook because I'm keeping it as a keepsake and the pen as well. That was such a lovely evening. It was lovely that what I found so enjoyable about the evening was that you recognised your staff for all the good work that they do. That was really lovely. And I think some of them were quite surprised and shocked at actually getting recognition for all their hard work. What also touched me was there were service users there as well, who I engaged with in the lobby, over dinner, and just general conversation. So that was really nice. So why Signpost for you, Tim?
Oh, that's a big question.
It is.
So I think I could start by saying Signpost chose me rather than I chose Signposts.
Okay. Even better.
My journey has been quite a long one to get to where I am today. But if I look at it, and I'm happy to go into it in detail, or a little bit of detail because we'll be here all day otherwise, it was always taking me to where I am today.
Right.
The experiences I've experienced, the places I've been, the issues I've faced have all brought me to where I am here today. And I think this is the first job I've ever had, or the first organisation I've ever worked for, where from day one it felt like it was home. And when I say home, I genuinely mean I felt a sense of belonging that I'd never felt at work before. I felt I'm at the right place. And since then, so I've been with Signpost now coming up to 10 years. This is my 10th year as an employee. I haven't been the CEO those whole 10 years. However, what I have found is not one day in those 10 years have I thought to myself, I've got to go to work today. That just hasn't happened at all, just doesn't happen at all. Now, I recognise I'm really privileged that I'm in a position where I can vary my role enough to keep it exciting and interesting for me. I've recently had a diagnosis for ADHD and recognise that it's really important I'm able to do that. So I'm very fortunate to have that, and I don't undervalue the fact that I'm 6 foot something, I'm white, I'm a male, and I have a middle class voice. It has a lot to do with the success I've achieved. It's not all about how great Tim is, it's about the privilege being someone like me comes with. And for me, that's really important that I remember that, I acknowledge that, and not so much apologise for it, but allow my feelings around that to be spoken, because I think it's really important that we challenge it as a society. And that there's far too many white men leading to far too many organisations. And
It's interesting you say that.
That needs to change.
It does need to change. And that's it's very refreshing to hear that from, someone of your background. That is really, really humbling as well, actually, to hear that. With regard to the ADHD that you've just been diagnosed with, how did that come about, Tim?
The diagnosis?
Yeah.
Okay, well, so I'm a recovered addict. So I've recovered from addiction to drugs and alcohol. I've been in recovery for, this is my 18th year of recovery. And that's a long journey. There's a lot of learning about yourself in those 18 years. So I stopped taking drugs and alcohol then, but the behaviours and stuff and the things that maybe drove me towards it, I have had to do a lot of work around that. I did a lot of therapy around early life adverse experiences. I try not to call it trauma because I don't know. I'm very mindful that there are traumas out there that young people have experienced and continue to experience that are so damaging. I'd rather not speak of them. However, for me, I guess that was more of an adverse childhood experience in that it was traumatic for me, but whether I want to call it trauma or not, I struggle because I think I don't want to. It's that humility thing again, isn't
yes.
it? But anyway, so I've had to do a lot of therapy around that, and the therapist I was speaking to, she said to me, "Have you thought maybe you might have ADHD?" I was like, no. And then, so I belong to the 12-step fellowship, Cocaine Anonymous, and I go to fellowship meetings reasonably regularly. And what around that time I was hearing a lot was my ADHD this and my ADHD that. I was beginning to hear a lot of fellows in the fellowship who either had or were going for an ADHD diagnosis. So I thought, I'd do a bit of research, get to understand it a bit, and then all of a sudden, listen to an Audible book. I forget the name of the author, but she spoke about her journey towards an ADHD diagnosis, and I was like, oh my goodness, that's me.
Everything
the things that she disguised,
wow.
she disclosed in it as the symptoms of her ADHD. I was like, wow, that's me. And I guess I've had two light bulb moments. The first one was when I came into recovery and first read through the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous and began to understand the disease of addiction and the reasons why I did a lot of things I did. Then the second one was this. I was like, oh my goodness, this is really even more opening up more realisation to why. And it was funny because it was always something that I was shying away from because it came with, essentially ADHD means you've got a smaller prefrontal cortex than everybody else, like the neurotypicals, and therefore executive functioning skills are one of the issues that comes with it. And I never wanted to admit that I might have a poor executive function or that I had a smaller bit of my brain. So as much as there's humility, there's ego.
Of course,
There's ego there.
Yeah, always.
Anyway, so this was all bubbling on. It's just, you know what, this is a no-brainer. However, we all know that getting NHS diagnosis for this is a journey in itself. But fortunately, my wife works for a company who provide medical insurance, and the medical insurance they provided for her meant that she could get a ADHD or autism assessment done. So we could pay for me to join the group, the policy, whatever it was per month, and so we did. Now, the other thing about ADHD is you set the mind to do something. It doesn't always happen when you want to do it or when you think you should. So about 6 months later, I eventually got around to logging onto this system and getting myself a GP appointment and all the other things that needed to happen to get this assessment done. And you know what, that assessment was, the first bit was an hour or so. The second one was meant to be a 2-hour appointment with a qualified assessor. 3 hours later, we finished the call and lots of tears. I found it hugely emotional. Gone through the whole of my life, from child through to now, and the impact and the questions that this woman asked. And then I was left with, I've gone through all of this. What if it's not ADHD?
Right.
What if I'm just
a
dumb person? You can't manage life.
Oh my!
I shouldn't use
Can
that.
you tell it? Well, can you tell us?
I was going to swear. So
I know you were. What can you tell us? What symptoms or what somebody who possibly, like you, thinks that they may have ADHD? What should they be looking for, or how can we, through this podcast, help people that might feel that they're in that position as well?
So I think the big one for me is so when I think of ADHD, or when you think of ADHD, you think of people running around and being really active. Now, yes, you do get that. However, for me, the hyperactivity is in my mind.
Right.
So my mind is constantly coming up with new thoughts, and I'll grab, particularly if it's exciting.
Right.
I'm always looking for the next shiny thing or the next exciting thing. So you could say that my mind's like a washing machine. But I was watching a program on BBC recently, My ADHD Mind, and there's a chap on there who created a film from his family and his friends to describe it, and he described it as, these tombola cages that have balls in them that are spinning around, and every so often a ball will drop out. That's how he sees it.
Wow.
So you don't know what the thought's going to be; it just comes.
Right.
And you're like, no, I don't want to do that, or yes, I'm going to do
that. Right.
So that's one of them. Another one is I have time blindness, so I can't really see timelines. So I'm either ridiculously early or late. I really struggle to get somewhere on time.
Right.
So I'll give you this morning as an example. I got up at 5:30 this morning. Need to be out of the house by 8:30. A few things I need to do, like feed the children breakfast, do their packed lunches, get myself ready for work, and if I've got time, do a few emails or whatever. So I come downstairs, I've got 3 hours, fine. So on the laptop, oh no, it's 6:30, I should be upstairs by now.
Right.
And it becomes a rush to the extent now, when I come home tonight, there's tidying up I've still got to do because I didn't
do it this morning.
Yeah, I had 3 hours to do everything. And it just
goes.
So I just can't manage that. Then there's RSD, which is about rejection sensitivity. So somebody might be giving me some feedback. It could be positive. It could be, encouraging, or it could be just saying, you might want to think of that something differently, and I will take it really personally.
Right.
I have to really be careful around that one because I can really get ultra defensive. As a result of that. Then there's things spatial awareness. I'm always walking into door frames, walls.
Really?
Yeah, I can be clumsy. I'm always dropping things. It's not clumsy. I just have this.
Yeah.
And I think the thing is, it's easy distraction. I'm constantly distracted. Very hard to stay focused on something, yet have an innate ability to be able to hyper-focus on something to the last degree.
Yeah.
Once I'm in the zone, I'm there.
You're there, right?
Yeah. So that's pretty much what it is.
Okay.
And ultimately, what it is, my brain, because it's a small prefrontal cortex, either doesn't produce enough or doesn't receive enough dopamine. Therefore, I'm looking for things to create dopamine. That's why it's always looking for the next exciting thing. And boring or perceived boring, monotonous tasks are low dopamine. Therefore, I'm not inclined to do them. So that's where
they get left.
Things like reports and stuff might get left at the last minute because I just don't really want to do it.
Yeah.
The answer, I take medication. I don't think medication is the answer for everybody.
No.
But it has been 100% for me.
Okay.
So I was diagnosed 18 months ago now. I had to go through a year of paying for that medication privately whilst I was waiting for an NHS prescribing, which has now happened, so I now get my meds on the NHS.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been a journey.
Sounds like it. So with regard to Signpost and because you're the CEO, that means you're right at the top, you're the head. How do you then function and focus on what needs to be done here at work every day? Because it's a big organisation, isn't it? You're essentially looking after, I don't know how many people work here, but ultimately you're in charge of all those people.
Yeah. Can I frame that slightly differently?
You can.
So I'm not in charge of anybody. I'm responsible for... So the board of trustees at Signposts delegate operational responsibility of Signposts to me and my team.
Yeah.
And my team is the really important part to the answer of this question, because ultimately I see my role more as being somebody who's here to facilitate an environment where people can do that operational delivery of Signposts. Yes, there are things that I have to do. I have a team around me which are fantastic at not just reminding me, because I don't employ it, but also they understand how I work. And it can, I'm sure it must be really frustrating for them. It must be. And I acknowledge that regularly, because it can't be easy working with me. However, there are strengths as well. We'll come to those in a minute.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing I'd like to mention is I'm not at the top of anything. If anything, I like to think of myself as being at the bottom, holding things up, rather than at the top, expecting everybody to do things as I say.
Yeah.
Because I'm a firm believer that the solution to every problem is very close to the problem. So if there's an issue within Signposts that needs some kind of a decision to be made, the people closest to that problem are the ones that should be making that decision.
Right.
And they should feel empowered and safe to do that. And obviously every decision we make comes with unintended consequences, and we need to understand what might have caused that. So there's reflection then to see, was that decision good? Did it deliver what we wanted? Where's the learning? And for me, that's where growth comes. So we're not there 100% yet, but I'm starting to see some really strong, not just sprouts, but strong growth in this area in Signposts, where people who have autonomy are beginning to make those decisions and push them forward without coming to me for approval. And that's, for me, that's
where you want to be.
Yeah, no one person should be approving everything.
No.
As you mentioned, we're an organisation with, depending on what time of year it is or what services we're delivering, anything from 30 to 50 members of staff, then are you going to rely on the one puny brain, or are you going to have 30 to 50 really strong, magnificent brains, all doing their thing?
Same thing.
I know what I would prefer.
100%. Yeah, I would definitely prefer the 30 to 50. With regard to homelessness, can you see an end to it?
I had on my list of things to talk about as well. So ending homelessness, for me, yes, but you need to define what that really means. So if we're to say we will end homelessness, meaning nobody will ever be homeless again, no, I don't think we'll ever get to that point, because it's such a complex thing that is caused by so many different societal, political and personal things, that I think it's always going to be something that will bubble up for people. What we can do is have a system and services that mean we can end homelessness as a persistent thing for an individual, that we can find solutions for people.
Yeah.
I believe we can do that.
Yeah,
100%.
I do, 100%. What is the ethos of Signpost?
Ethos. So obviously we have our values, and we have our mission, I guess, which is, like I said, it's ultimately is to end homelessness. The ethos behind it, I think, is everybody deserves and has a second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth chance. I don't think, and that goes for staff as well as clients. I think we all make mistakes, we all get things wrong, and that's how we grow and learn, and therefore we need to be forgiving around that. Now, that does always come with the caveat that making the same mistake over and over again or doing some ridiculously silly things that might not be legal, then obviously they come with consequences that need to be felt. And I think that's really important as well, because if you do make a mistake and there are consequences to feel, that's part of that growth, is understanding, if I do this, it makes me feel like this, and I don't really want to feel like this anymore, therefore I'm going to try not to do it again. It's a really good way of teaching your mind not to do that. Yeah. And that, for me, that's very much about reflection. So reflection isn't just about, was it successful, it's how did it make me feel? So if it's, for example, making a decision on an individual client's journey within Signposts, for whatever reason there's a decision to be made, and that decision is made, how does it make you feel? Did it deliver the outcome you were hoping for? If not, how can we
change it?
And we have facilitated reflection to enable that process within Signposts. We've been advocates of PI for many years. I first encountered PI when I worked for NOAA, and when I came to Signposts 10 years ago was when I pushed for us to bring it in. And one of our first groups I belonged to in Luton as a ops manager with Signposts was the Mental Health Forum with Gail Deering. I don't know if you've met Gail. Great community person. And between us, we tried to start this psychologically informed environments within that group. It started to get some traction. Organisations like Impact, Mary Seacole started to join us in the movement to create it and develop it in Luton, and now it's written into all of the contracts within Luton, along with trauma-informed care.
Yeah, it's good. For those who don't understand PI, can you explain what it is?
Yeah. So essentially, psychologically informed environments are about understanding where somebody's at when they come into our service and what it must feel like. So trying to create a better level of empathy and an environment that makes people feel at home and comfortable and at ease. So if I think of my journey, part of my life meant that I spent time homeless. In the 90s, I ended up in a homeless hostel in northwest London. And in there, I lived in a dormitory with 20 other men, ranging from street drinkers, crack, heroin users, to, at the time I was a young man, incredible to think of, but I was in my mid-20s. And I didn't have those. I used a bit of ecstasy or whatever, but just realised now that I couldn't actually sustain accommodation because of my executive function. Another story.
So how did you? Can you explain how you ended up that? How that downfall happened for you?
Yeah, I'll come back to that in a second. Let me just finish this, because this is about. So that, for me, that environment was not psychologically informed. It was incredibly scary.
Being in and amongst that. Right.
And what it did is it shaped me as someone who, I came out of that hostel and I said I vowed I would never go into a hostel ever again as long as I lived.
Right.
Fast forward 20 years, I turn up in Luton, living here for a number of years. I start using drugs again, end up homeless again. went to know a day centre for support, and they suggested I go to Signposts. I said,
wow.
is that a hostel? And they said, yeah. I said, I'm not going into a hostel, and I didn't come.
That's incredible.
And so that experience as a young man of a hostel prevented me going to get support later in life as a result. And when I arrived at Mo at that time, you know, when someone's homeless, it feels really lonely, and you know, you spend quite a lot of time trying to hide from people, but you realise also that people, once you start to smell and you look dirty, people will try to hide from you as well.
Yeah.
And very quickly you can become very isolated, and that's probably how I was when I turned up at Noah. So turning up at Noah, I felt really scared and intimidated, didn't really want to ask for help because it meant I'd admitting failure and all this sort of stuff. So there's quite a lot underneath all of this sort of bravado. Is a lot of fear.
Yeah.
And so if you're going into somewhere that's not psychologically informed, it's just going to accentuate that fear even more for you. So for somebody who's autistic, it would be around sensory. So having environments where you've got lamps set rather than big lights and all that. Those are the sort of things that... and I think it's also really important to involve the people that are living in the building at the time as to what it should feel like and look like. But ultimately, and I think Luton's got really good at this.
I think we have.
It is creating comfortable and appropriate accommodation, and we're all striving to get better.
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer that people deserve the best we can possibly afford.
Absolutely.
So, and how did I end up homeless? Well, ultimately it comes, and this is the realisation I have now about the ADHD, it comes back to when I left home. Well, I say when I left home, when I was told to leave home at 18, and I started to rent and what have you. I struggled to hold jobs down because I keep turning up late.
Right.
And in the 80s, that was a frowned upon thing to turn up. Probably is today as well.
It still is, yeah.
And then I get paid monthly, and of course the money in my account meant that I can go and do that exciting thing that's been on my mind, like buy a new top or whatever it might be. Not the rent, because that's a low dopamine task. So I did not pay rent and end up
Homeless.
Yeah, it ended up in the end me being homeless, yeah. So I'd been living with some friends for a few years, and they'd had enough, and they said, "You got to go."
Wow.
And I was on the streets for about two months.
On the streets of London, or
Winchway or Palmer's Green.
How did that feel? From having had what sounded like a reasonable childhood, could we say, or not?
Yeah. I think
from a reasonable
there were
childhood,
issues, but not anything major.
To having a job, to having a home, to losing that home, so for surfing or staying with friends, and now suddenly you're on the streets of London. Tell me how that felt. Day one.
I've got to find a way to survive.
Right.
And I've got to find a way for people not to see me, people I knew, and I've got to find a way to keep clean. So I used to go into McDonald's in Southgate every day to have a wash and a shave. And I used to go into Tesco's in Palmer's Green and pinch a bit of food to eat. And I used to sleep on benches, either in parks or in train stations, to keep warm. And I was fortunate, it was in August, coming into September sort of time, so the weather wasn't too bad. So I did this for, like I said, for about 8 weeks. And obviously I was beginning to get dirty and smelly despite trying to wash. And I didn't know what to do or where to go or whatever, and I was just kind of, I don't know. I used to go to the library and read a lot, catch up on sleep during the day in the libraries. And then I got chased out of a few shopping centres, and then I went to Tesco's in Palmer's Green, and I pinched a Scotch egg, and I was walking down the road, and these two police arrested me. And they took me to Edmonton Green Police Station, and the inspector said, we're going to give you a caution, but what I'm going to do is, you've got an appointment tomorrow with the local authority, and you've got an appointment with the job centre to get your benefits sorted. We're going to keep you in the cells tonight so you've got somewhere to sleep, and then you go to these places tomorrow. And they brought me some food that night. They were really kind.
Yeah,
they were really
like
kind. But I never knew hostels existed, and I didn't know how to claim benefits. So I got my benefit claim submitted, and then they said they gave me a travel card to go over to Wilston, where the hostel was, and that's how I ended up there. Yeah, and once again, they were really kind when I arrived there. As much as the environment wasn't psychologically informed as we look to now, that first bath, that was dirty, but it was so nice.
Yeah,
So nice to have a
I can imagine.
And it took a while to get clean. But,
Right.
Yeah. And I was there for probably about a year, and then I moved on into the next stage, which is very much like the accommodation we provide here in Signposts. Those pods with. But once again, I wasn't doing my personal contribution. Eventually got pooed out, but yeah. And then working in pubs around London is how I stayed homed from then on.
Right.
So it was always, and so I went from northwest London to East London, back to northwest London. Yeah, I worked in little bars, saw a lot of things.
Your experiences, what you've experienced, how does that, what's the word I'm looking for? How does that make you feel now doing the job that you do?
So it's really important I never forget that past, because I need to remember what it must feel like for anybody who comes into our services. And there's something that I've been meaning to do for many years, and I still haven't done it, and I must put it back on my list, is I think I should experience at least one night a year of living in one of our buildings. Just haven't done it yet, and pay what it costs to live there, not expect it for free. And I will do that. But I guess what it also does is that decision of mine never to go back into a hostel has meant that I am really driven to providing the best we possibly can for people. Yeah, I think that's probably the thing.
Because it must be quite daunting, mustn't it? We've done a few podcasts about, renovating buildings, your first night, what you'll need. And I think as providers, we're getting better, as you said, at making sure that first experience is a good one. I think that's what, for me, that's what it's all about, making sure that first night doesn't feel daunting, that you have got a bed, that you have got bed sheets, that you have got like a starter pack, some tea, coffee, something to eat, and making sure that your support worker or housing provider or officer is with you when you get to the property, so you don't walk in there when you're on your own.
Absolutely, and I'm absolutely convinced that first impressions count, don't they? We all, doesn't matter what walk of life we're in, it's that first initial meeting that sets the tone for the rest of the relationship. Generally, sometimes you fall in love at first sight. Other times you don't.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. So for us as a provider of accommodation, I think it's really important that we remember we call people clients for a reason, not because we don't want to call them service users, which I really don't want to do anyway, but because they are a client. You know, they are our customer or one of our customer base, and they've chosen to live with us. And I think that's really important to remember, that it's a choice.
Yeah.
You know, people don't have to live at Signposts. You know, we're fortunate in Luton that there is a diverse range of providers and accommodation that it doesn't suit everybody's needs at all by any stretch, but it certainly goes a long way towards providing different things for different people in different stages. And I think that's the richness of Luton provision, and has been for many years. I've been doing this now I've been in recovery for 18 years, but I've been working in the sector for 18 years as well, as a peer volunteer, then an employee and stuff. So I've been around the block a few times.
Yeah, you've seen a lot. What's 2026 looking like for Signpost?
So every year I'm full of excitement. So there's two answers to that question. The first one is, at the beginning of every year, I go through a process of reviewing the previous year and looking forward to the coming year, not setting New Year's resolutions, but setting goals for myself and for my work and for my family. And as part of that process, I always look to see, is there still something that I can bring to Signposts? And if the answer to that question is yes, then I've got another year. If not, then I need to have a conversation with the board and say, you might want to start looking for somebody else, because I don't think I'm the right person anymore for Signposts. So for me, it's really important that Signposts isn't about me, it's about Signposts. So I'm not looking to leave any legacy or anything like that. I'm just the custodian for the current time of this great organisation, as you said, been here for 40 years. So what does that mean for 26? Well, as you know, we had our event in October where we celebrated 40 years of Signposts, but we also looked to the next 5 years of Signposts, and we set a clear strategic intent of where we want to be in 5 years' time. And that vision was created in partnership with our board, our clients and our staff. So it wasn't just me sitting down writing a document. We all got together and came up with this plan. It's important to remember strategy is only a hypothesis, it's a theory. It is, if with a fair wind and everything going right, we'll be there in 5 years' time. So we now got 5 years to test that theory. And so year one of that is 2026. So I'm really excited about that. We've got lots of things that we're doing, transformative things within Signposts. And I don't mean restructuring, I mean transforming and changing everything about the organisation over the next 5 years to, turn what is already a fantastic, great organisation into something even better. And that's the vision. And that's what excites me. That's the shiny thing.
That's the shiny thing.
That's the shiny thing.
You're reaching for.
Yeah. And behind that then is the day-to-day operational stuff, which is really tough for the team. They work really hard. I'm fortunate. I work for an organisation that's full of fantastic people, beautiful people. I genuinely love everybody who works for Signposts. I don't mean that in a romantic sense, but just in a general, I have a real sense of feeling of warmth and love for them. And I see it as my role to make that as enjoyable and good for them as possible. So one of the things that we're working on this year is to create an organisation where our staff feel valued, cared for, rewarded, both financially and visibly, for the great work that they do. And that they have a real influence on what we do. So what I'm working on, a long way of saying, what I'm working on now is transforming that vision we presented in October into what are clear measures for the organisation that we can report on that can actually start to show the progress towards that.
Yeah.
And then can also show each individual's contribution to that, because we all have a part to play. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Just to finish, what I'd like to finish on is, if someone should find themselves, you've been there, you've done it, you understand how daunting, how scary, upsetting that can be. So should someone find themselves homeless, what's the first thing, Tim, you'd advise them to do?
Mm-hmm. Seek help.
Yeah.
Seek help. And that is a levelling of pride that not everybody can do at that time. And so it's a very simplistic answer. Yeah, where I live, there's a chap, his name's Chris, and he's been sleeping on our streets for at least 4 or 5 years now, on and off. He has periods in prison, periods where he might go into a hostel. And he always returns to his little spot, and I'm always there having a chat with him. And we have a great conversation. I brought him to Signposts before, and it wasn't right for him at that time. But it's about just always being there, because one day it will be the right time, and one day there will be that window of opportunity, and we have to be there to help. So, yeah, I think that would be the thing, is seek help, because it is there, and quite often in the most unusual places.
It's been an absolute pleasure. You've shared so much with us, some of it quite emotional as well. I got emotional right in the middle. I'm trying to, hold it together. But thank you for taking the time to speak to us. It's been really informative. And wishing Signpost all the best for 2026.
Thank you, Jackie, and thank you for giving me your time also.
Oh, thank you.